I'm Steve Lascalzo, and this is The Way. Welcome to This is The Way podcast's reaction and discussion episode for Chapter 22 of The Mandalorian. It's Season 3, Episode 6, Guns for Hire. Now, there is a 1932 movie of the same name, and that Western plot does not really translate to Star Wars or this episode of The Mandalorian. I mean, I guarantee there's some influence and inspiration, but it doesn't translate perfectly, and in my opinion, not really even that close. But I kind of feel the same way about the vision for this episode.
Uh-oh. It's not good.
April 5th, 2023, that's when Season 3, Episode 6 came out, Chapter 22, Guns for Hire. As many of the episode titles do, I think this could end up referring to a number of characters, plot elements, and, that's not a bad title. The thumbnail description and full episode description are the same, and they read, The Mandalorian visits an opulent world. Not very descriptive of what's going on in this episode. The runtime for Episode 6, Chapter 22 shows up as 46 minutes in parentheses on the Disney Plus show page. If you press play, you're going to get to the credits in just under 41 minutes. Skip the previously on segment and opening sequences, and you can get through the episode in just over 38.5 minutes. Now, how about the concept art? Is there anything that we can learn? Well, Plaisir 15 looked a lot to me like the area of Kissimmee around the Disney World resort in Florida. I'm not just speaking of the triangle lattice dome resembling Epcot. The third image with the gauntlet on the landing pad and the forest, the swampy ponds, the grasses, that looked a lot like Central Florida. And I should know because that's where I'm from. The domes inside domes image made me think of the Contemporary Resort. You know how the monorail goes right through the inside of the hotel? Well, maybe you don't know, but I don't know if the rest of the resort was necessarily an inspiration. I do think there was a lot of elements of it that looked Disney World to me. The RA and astromech droids look less Imperial in the fourth image than they do live, but maybe that's just because the paint looks darker live than in the image. The banquet hall artwork is definitely different. Less extravagant, less lively. There's the art's secretion alien. That looks different. There's some tall-legged alien that is different from the live-action rainbow-colored giraffe body one that they have in the live show. Oh, the captain looks different. And so does the Duchess. Now, maybe that means that this was prior to casting. Sometimes, like in the case of Keller and Beck, it's clear from the artwork stage who was intended. That's further supported by the art for inside the control room, because it certainly doesn't look like Christopher Lloyd as Helgait there. And there are droids instead of humans working the various stations, whereas it's humans in the episode. A lot cheaper probably to get just people to put on costumes. I like the colors more in the artwork for the Ugnaught Workshop. I wonder why they went with a more muted and darker tone in live action. Maybe that's Bryce Dallas Howard. Maybe that's somebody else. There is a KX series droid and a guy in jeans in the street scene in the artwork, where Din is blasting the B-2 droid on the run. The lab or droid morgue looks a little different. So does the lab tech, but in those cases, art must have preceded casting. The Alice in Wonderland croquet pitch looks very similar, but the people playing look more like they're wearing Imperial officer outfits. And then the tall-legged alien is back here, but the rainbow giraffe Yopi thing from the banquet isn't in the live-action scene of, space croquet. The Mandalorian privateer camp looks like it's in someone's backyard in Claremont or Kissimmee. Now that I think about it, I want more Orlando suburb names popping up in Star Wars.
That can be arranged.
The credits start with the director, and this week, that's Bryce Dallas Howard. She's responsible for Sanctuary, and The Heiress, and the Book of Boba Fett's Return of the Mandalorian. I've liked her work. And she's going to return for more directing in the Star Wars universe when she handles one of the episodes of Skeleton Crew. That was, actually, there was a trailer for the series exclusively available to Star Wars Celebration attendees. And that was shown Friday. The show aired on Wednesday, and then that Friday they aired a trailer for Skeleton Crew. She's not a bad director, look. But she's not the best director in Star Wars. I understand people liked what she's done, and she's good. But even great directors can struggle with a script that's not their own. And in this case, the showrunner, I think, wrote a tough one. That's my opinion. Well, who wrote it? Writing credit for the episode belongs to Jon Favreau. Say what you want. I agree. He revived an era of Star Wars I thought we might not see again. After the Johnson and Abrams movies. In my opinion, though, this was not great. If I had to rank it, it would definitely be near the bottom of all available episodes of the series, and definitely of this season. Paul Hewen is back as director of photography, but he's alone this time. Dylan Furshine, the voice of the taxi droid on Coruscant, he is listed as one of the editors, one of the many episodes that he's credited with, but this time he's alongside J. Eric Jessen, another longtime Mando and Book of Boba Fett collaborator. Again, if you're editing, if you're directing, a lot depends on what you're given from someone else, right? The script or in the shooting. Goranson and Shirley are still credited with the theme and the score, and I want to again mention, if I have already, maybe I haven't, but Volume 1 of the Season 3 soundtrack, featuring scoring from episodes 1 through 4, is now available for streaming. I think Volume 2, containing 5 through 8, will probably come right after the season. One more cast note, costume design, is Shauna Tripsick, and I want to mention her because she is the one responsible for that really cool jacket that Captain Carson Teva wears. There's one, I don't know if she's costume design for Ahsoka 2, but Hera's got a cool one. And I just figured, hey, can't hurt to mention her, right? Let's move on to the people that are acting.
Nobody here gives their real name.
Actually, before I start, I want to talk about something I heard out of Star Wars Celebration, and it was Rick Famuyiwa, I think, that said, well, the Mandalorian now doesn't just refer to Din Djarin, but it has just been Din Djarin as the Mandalorian up until this point. I mean, there is no doubt that the way they've described episodes, the character, even in universe, a lot of people refer to him as the Mandalorian. And it doesn't matter that they don't necessarily know his name. He has been the Mandalorian for the viewers up until now. Now it seems like they're intending that, okay, well, the Mandalorian of the show no longer refers just to Din Djarin. But no longer or not anymore means he was beforehand. Now they're transitioning. And it may have to do with casting for season 4 or for the future. There's going to be a movie directed by Dave Filoni that will tie in a lot of the Star Wars television universes in one big event. But for now, or up until now, when we say The Mandalorian, we're talking about Din Djarin, and that's Pedro Pascal. And he's not even in the suit. Maybe not at all this season, maybe just a little bit. It's almost always either Lateef Crowder or Brendan Wayne, and they are now credited as co-stars.
You will forever have my gratitude.
Is Bo-Katan Kryze now the Mandalorian of record? Well, we're not really sure about that. It could be Grogu too, right? Bo-Katan is played by Katie Sackhoff, and she is now helmetless once again for most of her action. I mean, even when it makes sense for her to put on her helmet, it seems like she's got her helmet off. And I don't know if that's acting choice, director choice, showrunner choice, but she gets to have her helmet off.
This is the way.
Simon or Simone, it's a guy, Cassianides. He is Axe Woves, the new leader of the faction of the Mandalorians, that was once led by Bo-Katan, and he was once one of her friends back in the Eris. Contrary to what she has been saying for a couple of years now, Mercedes Varnado is back as Casca Reeves. She is another of Bo-Katan's closest allies earlier in the series.
Sasha Banks is here!
And some people may know her as Sasha Banks from the WWE, the wrestling. Joining Star Wars this episode is Captain Bombardier, the bombastic Jack Black. Now, you can say he's the guy from School of Rock or the voice of the Kung Fu Panda, but I know him as JB from Tenacious D. And also joining the cast is Star Wars fan Lizzo. I am thrilled anytime a fan gets to be part of the world, but listen, they gave her a really big part for someone with no acting skills, and they called her the Duchess of a domed city with the sister of the Duchess, Satine, in the same episode.
We have a problem.
And they spelled Duchess Dutchess in the closed captioning. Lots of problems. We'll talk about it later.
Just pointing it out.
Listed next is Christopher Lloyd. I have a lot of respect for this guy. He has legendary roles to his credit.
What does a yellow light mean? Slow down. Okay. What? Yellow light mean? Slow down. Okay. What
But I feel like maybe they could have used some other takes where the line readings didn't come off.
These droids were all reprogrammed to serve the community from the stockpile of captured Imperial robotics scheduled to be scrapped at Carthon. The droids' reprogramming was a complete success until one day, an isolated event.
The way they did? If you watch the episode, I think you know what I'm talking about. I know other actors have complained about dialogue in Star Wars. You know, most famously like Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford. But Lloyd did not complain. I think he's a great actor. And I just think the line readings that he gave seemed off. That's all.
What? How very dare you!
Christine Adams voiced the Quarren Captain. That's how that role is credited, just as the Quarren Captain. I mentioned it in the first watch, but I get to mention it again here. She played Agent Weaver for 9 episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Not knowing their next move is exactly why S.H.I.E.L.D. needs to end this before it goes any further.
Harry Holland is credited as the Mon Calamari nobleman, and as we mentioned on the First Impressions podcast, way before other YouTubers and other podcasters, he worked with Favreau on Spider-Man No Way Home. He got that job because Harry Holland, he's Tom Holland's brother. I mean, it helps to know people, right? And it helps to be their brother. Saphir, the Ugnaught, I believe, is voiced by Dale Dickey. And she's got credits going back way like to the mid-90s. And it's very extensive. I just could not find a connection between her and Favreau or Filoni or Famuyiwa or even the casting director. I mean, it might be there. I just couldn't find it. Matthew Wood is back voicing the B1 series droid foreman.
That doesn't compute. You're under arrest.
So he's back as a battle droid. He's a sound editor, longtime contributor. He's appeared as Bib Fortuna in The Phantom Menace and in Chapter 16 of The Mandalorian.
Boba! Meeting Haking Buddha!
Now, Michael Carter was the original Bib Fortuna back in Return of the Jedi. But Matthew Wood, he's all over Star Wars. Movies, the TV shows. I mean, he has a lot of Star Wars on his resume.
You fool!
I've been trained in your Jedi arts.
Seth Gable voices the bartender droid. He's got recurring roles on his resume for Nip Tuck, Dirty Sexy Money, Fringe, Salem, and Big Sky. And Jen Cover is the lab tech. It's probably her biggest role so far. And a look at the performance artists and stunt performers didn't turn up any surprises for me. It looked like most of the usual names are involved. Chris Bartlett, he's done C-3PO and a lot of droids. Misty Rosas, you know from me mentioning her name a lot, all the things that she does. She was one of the Ugnaughts. And then Joanna Bennett, Barry Lowen, David St. Pierre, and many more. But there was no snap this week. And that's a first, as far as I can tell. I just checked before recording too, and it's still not there. But it is there for the previous episodes, including The Pirate. This previously on segment goes straight to the maw of that aquatic beast in the Heiress. And two things I noticed were Casca Reeves is the one who hands the pram to Din Djarin. So I guess she's the one that rescues Grogu. And Bo-Katan Kryze says, "Don't worry, brother," to him. Now, not in the literal sense, but it further hits home that they were rescuing someone they considered one of their own, even though they didn't know who it was. There's this sense of camaraderie, unless they had known he was from an opposing faction beforehand, then maybe they would have left him. This does bring back up something we wondered in the podcast about why were they there? Well, in the third episode of the entire series, the Mandalorian was given an option of bounties to take after giving Grogu to the client.
I want my next job.
Sure, fine. You hunters like to keep busy, right? These are all far away.
The further the better.
I'll take your pick. You've earned it. That's the best of the lot. A nobleman's son skipped bail. Looks like you're headed to the ocean dunes of Karnak.
If you remember, he never completes that job, but he took the puck. Perhaps that job got lost from the Bounty Hunters Guild and then offered to mercenaries. Mandalorian mercenaries. And more on that later. The previously on continues with Din accusing his rescuers of not being Mandalorian, and Axwoves says he's one of them as a slight. That was where we learned about the Children of the Watch being considered a cult by some people. I mean, that came straight out of Bo-Katan's mouth.
Children of the Watch are a cult of religious zealots that broke away from Mandalorian society. Their goal was to reestablish the ancient way.
There is only one way. The way of the Mandalore.
The next scenes are Moff Gideon wielding the Darksaber in combat. Din Djarin, and he's fighting and then he loses it. It gets tossed to the side, basically. And later he explains how the ownership of the blade changes based on who wins it in battle. Well, that toss, or the, when it's torn from his hand or thrown from his hands with the spear, it goes across the floor, very similar to how it did in Mines of Mandalore when that weird spider, what did they call it, a spider tank, captured him and then that creature tossed it away from his belt. I mean, this is Harry Potter Elder Wand type stuff. Now listen, J.K. Rowling may not have invented that type of rule, but she certainly popularized it for modern entertainment. Okay, so when I talk about that, the I don't know, the chain of custody for the lightsaber, that's what I'm talking about. Next, we see Din approach Bo-Katan on Kalevala. She explains, "My followers left. They're making their way through the galaxy as mercenaries." We then see Din picking up the helmet in the Mandalore Underground. He gets captured, disarmed, and then saved by Bo-Katan, who grapples that Darksaber on the ground, uses it skillfully to end the threat, not once, but twice. It's then Din who we see waking up in the camp after rescue. We hear him telling Bo-Katan, the creed is meaningful. Mandalorians, our people, he says, are scattered like stars in the galaxy. But he admits he will always be in her debt. The previously on skips several episodes, then goes to the last episode, the pirate, when the armor tells Bo-Katan, remove your helmet. Bo-Katan does slowly. We don't hear her argue about it. Then we hear those scattered stars have strayed from the way. Then they both tell the covert, basically, on Navarro, she's off to bring other Mandalorians to their tract of land, and she is able to walk both worlds. And she also has a higher purpose.
Bo-Katan walks both worlds. And she can bring all tribes together. It is time to retake Mandalore.
Seeing the previously on segment again during research, after seeing the episode and after hearing from Star Wars Celebration how Chapter 23 is going to start, and yes, I do know everything about the next episode already, it makes more sense why certain elements don't show up in this episode. It is strange that they had the scene with the derelict Lambda shuttle at the end of the last episode, but they completely ignore it here. I understand that happens from time to time. Sometimes you plant that seed early, but it's not very good storytelling to use that as a cliffhanger and then not address it at all in the next episode. The Force Awakens, for example, should have ended when the Falcon went to light speed. Instead, they tack on the shot of Luke and Rey and the lightsaber. That's not a good cliffhanger. Or rather, the director ruined it if there was a different intention. You know, if you're not going to continue the story, then put that scene after this episode. That would have made more sense. Have this episode and then have Carson Teva come up on the shuttle. That would make better storytelling. The first shot of the episode is very Star Warsy. You get a shot of the starfield, then a pan to a moving starship. That says Star Wars to me. I know I'm not the only one to see the ship and think, wow, that looks like an alien head almost. Well, we find out very quickly that it might not be a coincidence that it looks like a Mon Cala or a Quarren head, because there is a Quarren in what reminded me of a Bacta tank. It's very interesting that she's in a tank that turns into a captain's chair. And the captain is fed a fish from a goblet that is poured into the tank. Just a weird, strange, hey, we're in Star Wars kind of a scene. The first dialogue is alien, and the translation appears on our screen. That doesn't always happen for us. Sometimes we just hear alien language and people reacting, like when Chewbacca talks, for example. We don't see the translation on the screen for us. Or when R2 speaks, we don't see a translation of the beeps. Here we do. The translation mentions Trask, the planet from the Eris where Axe, Bo-Katan, and Casca rescued Din and Grogu. I think we now know why the Mandalorians are tracking this ship. This ship was almost assuredly hired after Din Djarin took the puck but never completed the job for the guild because, he was on the run after rescuing Grogu. Now, this Imperial ship, Gideon's captured ship, is chasing this Quarren cruiser that's trying to avoid shipping lanes to Trask. Why? The Mon Calamari nobleman's son is on board. The Quarren captain hails what she thinks is an Imperial warlord. Just last episode we heard from Greef Karga. He said to a droid, he didn't want to negotiate. His droid, don't negotiate. I don't want to set a bad precedent. Well, this is the first thing that this captain tries.
I am not a criminal.
Of course not. I intended no disrespect.
Axe Woves is in charge, and Casca Reeves and several others are there, and they know that the Quarren, Captain Shuggoth, I think they call her, and that the Mon Cala royalty, they're in love. Doesn't matter, not personal, it's not war, just business. They were hired by the nobleman's mother, a viceroy, and they're going to complete their job. So there it is. I mean, a nobleman's son jumps bail or something like that. I think this is confirmation that the puck that Din Djarin took in episode 3 of the entire series is the same, this is the same job. But this scene, it's just not a very good one. It's, let's be honest, to me it was laughable. I don't know if it's just the dialogue, what we see on screen with the tentacle caressing and the big eyes of the Mon Cala species. I mean, every time I watch it, I just shake my head. I don't have any connection to these characters, even though it's supposedly the same one from season 1. The ridiculousness of this outweighs any pity that I might have for them. It's not that it's ridiculous that these two species are in love. It's just how we see it on screen. I mean, the best line of this whole scene is probably the last one for me.
I thought Mandalorians were honorable.
We are, kid. All it takes is a few credits.
Best one because it gets us out of that scene. We next see Din, Bo-Katan, and Grogu after the slate, calling it Guns for Hire, and they're heading down World Drive, looking for the signs to meet their friends at their hotel. Now, when Axe said Plaisir 15 in the last scene, my 5 years of French classes in high school and college kicked in. I heard pleasure. Plaisir. Pleasure. This makes me think Pleasure Island, which used to be near Disney World, and the domed city is reminiscent of Epcot, and the landscape of the planet is green with trees and grasses and ponds. The scene inside the gauntlet ends up being all information for us. It's reminding us of the Imperial warships, the split of the factions, but I'm taken out of it a little bit by Plaisir 15, what we just saw on the Quarren ship. And I'm also very annoyed that the controls to the gauntlet end up being taken over by the planet's landing commissioner, or whatever it is. A tractor beam would have been better. A ship being controlled simply by entering the airspace, that opens up a can of worms I don't think Favreau intends to open. How's this not standard tech on all Imperial worlds? And yes, I don't care if it's expensive or not. I don't care that it was developed afterwards. Once it exists, someone can do it cheaper. Someone will have heard about it. And this is something that the New Republic can't know about. I mean, this is an awful, awful decision to have the ship being taken over. That's number 2. The first being the star-crossed story of the Mon Cala and the Quarren. And now this gaping hole in lore to me. And I know a lot of people just let it, it's whatever, it takes it over. But why isn't everyone doing this then?
Join us! Come! It's a party! Come! Everyone, special guests, Mandalorians.
And hey, we get to numbers 3 and 4 pretty quickly after they sat down. You see, Din and Bo-Katan recognize these Imperial droids, or recognize that they are Imperial droids, not these specific ones. And then after they're trying to request travel to the privateer forces outside of town, they end up being denied, and they're brought to a royal banquet. That's fine. But it's Jack Black and Lizzo. And I don't mean they're playing alien species or they're playing characters in Star Wars. It's just Jack Black and Lizzo. They both stand out. And for me, it's in a bad way. Maybe if they were just alien species, maybe we just hear their voices, it would have been a little bit less awful. But there's still the dialogue, and maybe some of Lizzo's voice acting could have been tightened up a little bit. But if you have her in live action, you can see her mouth moving. So if she was an alien, you could have fixed maybe some of her bad line readings. Maybe. Jack Black is playing himself, or the character he always plays, which again, if we saw that in alien form, maybe that works better. But he's playing basically a stylized version of himself. I think it works very poorly. The scene is supposed to be there to show opulence. I mean, it says that in the description of the episode, right? An opulent world. There's this trailing hologram of Lizzo's character very rainbowish, and then there's this bombasticness of Captain Bombardier, Jack Black's character. But we get very bad dialogue.
I hope you like secretions. Take a little sip. Come, please.
Gross. Okay? I mean, this is Luke and the green milk. Gross. Bombardier admits to being an amnesty placement, and as a former Imperial, his honesty does make me suspect him less as a suspect later, because that contrasts with Elia Kane's development earlier in this season. The fact, though, that they call Lizzo's character the Duchess is almost unforgivable, knowing what we know from lore, and knowing how little we've got about Bo-Katan's sister.
Duchess! Satine, wait! I just heard what happened in the Senate.
You're sweet to be concerned, but I promise I'll be all right.
I am concerned. We're friends, are we not?
Yes, friends and nothing more.
Satine, as your friend, I don't think you should make any decisions in this state of mind.
I wonder if this was somehow Favreau putting it in to check to see if someone leaks a script and then they think, oh, the Duchess is back. And then they decide, you know what, let's just keep that in. But in the closed caption, again, it's spelled Dutch, as in the Netherlands, with ESS. So D-U-T-C-H-E-S-S, not D-U-C-H-E-S-S, as in Dutchy, a feudal term. I mean, I don't care. It's just she can't act, so it makes it worse for me somehow. I mean, I like fans getting parts. They will take it more seriously than someone else who it's just a job for. And I'm not even suggesting she didn't take this role seriously. I think she went for it. I think it might have been at the suggestion of the director. But that, go for it here, is something you tell an experienced actor. I've got no knowledge of what happened on set. I just know what I see in the finished product. And of course, I noticed the flute music when Din and Bo-Katan entered the hallway. I know Lizzo plays the flute. And I didn't expect her to also play a part in the soundtrack. And I'm happy that Lizzo gets to enjoy Star Wars. I'm not going to comment on her sincerity. I'm just saying, the part you give her could have been less incidental to the plot. She could have spent less time on screen. And that would have befit her level of acting experience. And it wouldn't have taken so many people out of the... I mean, if you're going to have Jack Black there, don't have Lizzo in, acting opposite. I mean, just not good.
Exactly.
The plot is moved forward, finally, with the revelation that droids are misbehaving, and since they're programmed, someone has to be messing with that. If Bo-Katan wants to meet with the hired guns outside the city, she's got to do a favor first. This is the formula that works so well in Season 1. I don't mind that an episode like this exists. It's just that it's episode 6 in an 8-episode season. Before the season, we thought we might end up spending all 8 episodes leading up to Din Djarin's redemption in the Living Waters. Like, maybe that happens in episode 7 or 8. It might have been fun seeing him perform a quest chain of favors to get to Mandalore. If the quest chain is fun. I'm not talking kill 10 Womp Rats or anything. I do realize contracts definitely limit things. Like, so do production cycles, resources, money. But we're moving at light speed through stories that we want to see more of and then dragging our feet on an episode like this. I know. People like that it was a CSI or Law & Order, or I even heard some big content creators calling this a Scooby-Doo mystery. I like the concept, not the execution, and not the episode placement.
Exactly.
So Din and Bo-Katan head to Commissioner Helgait to see if he has answers or some idea of how to move forward with the droid problem. And honestly, if we're talking Scooby-Doo, this would fit because Helgait is the first person they meet after accepting the task. He's in a control room, and there is a supposed fail-safe button that's a big red button right out there. I mean, it's for all of us to see. I mentioned in the First Impressions podcast, this is where I started to think about Wall-E. But I mean, I knew, you all knew, the button's going to come into play later in the episode. I mean, you don't show it off like that if you're not going to come back to it. Not Occam's razor, it's Chekhov's gun. Christopher Lloyd is the commissioner, and his acting... Listen, the man's a legend, but...
The citizens are no longer required to work. They can spend their days engaging in recreation, the arts, and participating in our direct democracy. If we shut down the droids, our citizens wouldn't know how to survive. Our society would collapse.
Then what do you want from us?
To seek out and decommission any remaining rogue droids until we can fix the problem.
At the very least, Christopher Lloyd sounds bored. Now, could it be tired from a long day? I don't know. Did he do more than one take for any of his scenes? Was this the best take that we're seeing? I just expected more. Better. The story doesn't make much sense here either. Helgait sends them to the right place. On the one hand, not cooperating would make him look guilty, but seeking out the droids that are going to malfunction? I mean, if he wanted to end a threat of investigation, he would have provided an exact list. Just go and get these few droids, and then you can pick up your scheme back when they leave. As it is, he sends Din and Bo-Katan to the next quest vector.
Give us the list.
Well, for that, you'll have to go to the lower level and speak to the Ugnaughts.
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 Ugnaughts is the species that Queel was. If you remember him, and I do, Din is the best guy in the room still here. I mean, he knows the species. He knows how to deal with it. I know they're pushing Bo-Katan hard on us, but Din Djarin has to have some value. Otherwise, all of those seasons, the first few seasons end up being not really rewatchable to me because I know that he's not going to figure in the end story for here. I remember back in the Gunslinger episode, it was cool when Din Djarin was able to peacefully meet with the Tuskens on Tatooine. It showed us, hey, this is a skill a bounty hunter would certainly have. Being able to get into and out of places, get information from any source. You don't always have to kill everything in sight or hold hostages. I mean, that doesn't work when you're trying to track somebody who's not the person you're killing. And if you're trying to get information and you're always using a strong arm tactic, that's just not the way things work in the real world. Here, Bo-Katan is the brute force. She's got something to learn about diplomacy. I liked this. Here, Din Djarin is showing us, I was paying attention when I was talking to Queel. It's not like Queel gave him a lesson and said, this is how you talk to my people if you ever come across them again. No, he was picking up more than the words of the conversations that he was having. Or he picked up the words too, for sure.
I am Mandalorian Din Djarin, friend of Ugnaught Queel. You will answer our questions and help us with our task. I have spoken.
I don't want any one character to be always the smartest, always have all the answers. And I like how a little of the early score of The Mandalorian, maybe even some of the score from the Queel episodes, is heard in the background. Din Djarin takes the lead in the conversation. He's flattering. We hear from his mouth later what we could infer from this scene. They don't like their work being questioned, but this brings up, do the Anzellans give the Ugnaughts a run for the money on droid smithing? I mean, don't they? I mean, he's calling the Ugnaughts like, oh, you're renowned for your droid smithing, but the Anzellans really are the ones who have taken over as late. I would have loved to seen this friendly rivalry revealed. Like, well, the Anzellans I spoke to said Ugnaughts can't figure out why droids are malfunctioning or something like that. Bo-Katan could have been the one to name drop them. As it is, the Ugnaughts hand over a data pad and steer them to their next quest vector, which is the loading docks.
I haven't seen battle droids since the Clone Wars.
I have.
Any of them look suspicious?
They all look suspicious.
Oh, this is a restricted area. You are to vacate immediately.
Lots of missed opportunities, but this isn't one of them. Roger, battle droids. And there are tons of them. B1 being the foreman, that's cool. B2s being the dumb loaders. And I think that somehow, somewhere I saw something that said that fit from now Legends material where the B2s were just loader droids that were retrofitted to be battle droids. I'm not sure. I would have thought, though, seeing so many of them would have triggered PTSD in Din, but I guess that's something that's reserved for Mandalorian smithing hammers. I just think there should have been something there, because his suspicion of droids after warming up to them for so long, that would have hit home so much better if this was the first time he gets jittery again after all that development that we've seen from him over the 2+ season. As it stands, hearing Matthew Wood's voice again is the only pleasure that I take in this scene. There's, okay, maybe the Boston Dynamics kick that Din gives the B2 series loaders. I mean, he could have pushed them. The kick was clearly an homage to that viral video. I also liked how this called back to me how in Law & Order, when Briscoe and Logan's they're coming up to some blue-collar workers, they're always looking for a lead, and the droids are in the middle of loading. When they come in to question the foreman, they won't stop working. They're having the conversation while they're working. That's very Law & Order.
I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Why is that?
Well, as a precaution. Their base function was warfare.
I thought they were just checked out.
They were. What are you doing?
Then this shouldn't faze them.
Sir? Excuse me? Excuse me?
So, do droids get nervous? Clearly, the B1 foreman was hiding something. That should have set off red flags, should it not? They had more pressing matters, because when one of the loaders hits the ground after being kicked, it runs. But that's the last we see of this foreman. Now, it didn't stand and fight. The B2 just took off running, and this is the only one that reacts. But, and I guess you gotta advance the story somehow, and this is how Favreau decided to do it. And it's good action, it's a good chase, but it's kind of weak on plot strength. I like the jetpack jump Bo-Katan does. I wonder, why didn't she at least bring her helmet for some extra safety? But and listen, I am not going to translate all the Aurebesh in the scene. I'm sure others are going to do it. And, unless it's quick, obvious, I'm going to try to let that stuff go. I need to really limit my time doing some of the research on these shows, especially when it doesn't pay off. I know I saw somewhere that at one point there is a little Easter egg for the viewers, like, people are going to translate this and it means nothing. Fine. But that's not something cool that is going to pay off later. I really like that the droid crime scene bots come through and then they emit these floating crime scene holotape balls that I thought that was fun. I would have liked a little one-liner quip at the end.
The Resistor.
Sounds like a droid bar.
And there's an address.
On the way to the bar, now Bo-Katan is the voice of reason. And I guess Din Djarin's problem is with the droids. One scene he's working his way through diplomacy with the Ugnaughts, who are living creatures. And then we see him handling the battle droids poorly. Yes, I want to see each of them excel in something, but it was noticeable to me that there was this sudden change of who's the good cop and who's the bad cop.
You kicking droids is really not helpful.
I figured out which one was malfunctioning, didn't I?
You did it your way, now let me do it mine, okay?
The droid bar brings up issues for me. Like, they like music, like the humans. I mean, maybe since most of them perform services to humans, that might make some sense, but an appreciation would have to be programmed into the droids, right? There are all sorts of droids. And on this Easter weekend that I'm producing the podcast, dare I say, Easter eggs abound in this resistor bar. But I'm trying to be quick, so I'm not going to go through all of the droids that appear or where they're from, or it doesn't pay off, at least in this episode.
What are you getting at?
There has been a string of malfunctions that all point to this oil can.
You can check my registry. We are in full compliance with planetary hierarchical.
If you don't start answering questions, I'll yank your memory circuit and dissect it back at the lab.
Din Djarin is obviously the bad cop here, and there's a lot of wasted time in this scene. I mean, first, Bo-Katan explains to Din why his tactics are a bad idea, moments after she already did outside the bar. Second, we hear all the droids do is reason, but Din's not wrong when he says they're programmed not to hurt organics, and how's that going? And then we get the bartender spitting out some of that reasoning that, to me, just doesn't make any sense.
There are concerns among my customers that we will be replaced.
By what?
Humans. Most of us have been refurbished and reprogrammed. Some droids on Plazir date back to the Separatists. The New Republic would send them to scrap, but here on Plazir they are given a second chance. We don't want to be replaced. We still have a lot to contribute. Human life is so short. They don't ask that much of us. Organics created us. It's the least we can do.
Who Favreau was writing for here, I do not know. Maybe it was for my Roomba. I mean, we move on and we get a scene in the manager's office with the bartender.
Here, droids are served nepenthe.
What's nepenthe?
It is a viscous lubricant that protects against mechanical wear while delivering program-refreshing subparticles.
So nepenthe reprograms the droids that drink here?
It patches the programming as the commands of the mainframe change.
Nepenthe is not a Star Wars term, and since one of my majors is history with a focus on Roman and Greek mythology, I recognized the word. Now, I gotta be honest, I did not remember where I heard it or where I knew it from, but that's what the internet is for, and it's from the Odyssey. Basically, it was like a mind eraser, and no, not the shot. Favreau could have named it anything. He chose that word. Is he saying droids have feelings they have to wipe away? Well, no, that's not how the bartender described it, so then why use that word? Was Favreau flexing his reading list? All the malfunctioning droids all use the same batch. I mean, that's convenient. The same bad batch of nepenthe. Next stop for the cops is the morgue. And I wonder how the DA is going to handle this case in the second half of the show, right? I mean, it's a droid morgue of sorts. The lab tech's there, and an exam droid extracts a bit of the oil or whatever it is inside the B-2 that they shot down. That seems to be a problem based on how I've seen battle droids deactivated in the past. I haven't seen a lot of liquid shooting out, but okay. They start to analyze this liquid, and I don't understand if we're supposed to think the extraction caused the exam droid to malfunction too, but there wouldn't be any cross-contamination from a scientist. I mean, it's not like this machine ingested the oil in the syringe. It's possible, since we find out it's nanodroids, that there was something in the batch that somehow transferred through the syringe and it came out. It just worked way too quickly. And how do I know that? Well, these droids didn't start wigging out at the bar. They acted out much later.
They're still active.
Din uses the Darksaber to cut the exam droid in half, and then they can get back to work. Favreau's explanations are just not good. The nanodroids have a chain code? I mean, if it was created by the Techno Union, would it have a chain code? I guess they're saying chain codes were left in droids long before the dawn of the Empire. I mean, we saw in the Bad Batch when chain codes were supposed to be coming in. Maybe Favreau and Filoni are suggesting that the Emperor decided, hey, let's give everyone social security numbers like the droids already have. And while this was framed for us in that Bad Batch episode, I think it was the second one overall, it seems everyone went along with it. Even Bo-Katan Kryze, a Mandalorian, had a chain code. Not only that, Boba Fett did as well. this chain code thing, total screw up for me.
It's illegal.
Well, I mean, it should be. I mean, this is not midichlorian level, but it's messed up and it's dumb. Also messed up, Helgait hasn't been watching them with the security cameras this whole time?
Check the cycles of security cameras for any potential irregularities.
Commissioner, we have some questions for you.
Sorry, I have to check the data farm for anomalies.
We know about the Nepenthe and the nanodroids.
They didn't malfunction. You programmed them to disrupt an attack.
You're coming with us.
Everyone freeze!
Listen, I like Christopher Lloyd and I like Favreau. This is just not good writing. How did Helgait not get out of there? He's not watching them at every step? Helgait says he never gave up during the Corrupt Republic or the Empire, but it sure seems like he gave up here. I mean, maybe he's just old and he's tired. I don't know. If this was the only line reading that they got, maybe they had to make it work. But the silver lining to this whole scene is the name that he was gonna drop. It had to have been Anakin or Anakin Skywalker or something like that.
You're a separatist.
Separatist is a pejorative term. I support democracy. Count Dooku was a visionary. He was cut short in his prime by the Jedi forces.
All the security personnel do is sit and watch and just sit there watching him get tased. That's it. That's all they do.
Politics.
The investigation is wrapped up, brought back to Lizzo and Jack Black, and since my favorite Disney movie is the animated version of Alice in Wonderland, I can say with certainty, and by the way, it was also confirmed at Star Wars Celebration in just conversation, that this is a reference to Alice in Wonderland and the croquet scenes. Lizzo is even wearing what looks like Mickey ears to me. But if you don't think they're Mickey ears, it's at least a heart. And then she performs this toss, which is not a croquet thing, by the way. Tossing is not part of croquet. But the crawling bug does roll up, just like those little colored hedgehogs do in the animated movie. Grogu helps out using the Force like he's controlling chance cubes. And for that aid, he's going to get knighted later in the scene. Look, the less I say about these scenes, the better. It's got bad dialogue, delivered poorly.
Treasure blast! I've never seen such a streak! What are you doing with Commissioner Helgait?
We found the cause of your malfunctions.
Is this true?
I'm afraid it is, my lady.
Despicable.
I know. We get a Quacta calling the Stifling Slimy callback from Helgait. Cad Bane said it in the Book of Boba Fett, and Boba Fett said it in The Mandalorian Chapter 16. Lizzo asks if anyone among them hasn't made mistakes in the past, and if there is no room for forgiveness in a galaxy so vast. That, to me, sounds like Favreau trying to get a what is grief if not love persevering quote. The one quote that everybody said, oh, that was such a great line from WandaVision. But you should have given it to someone other than Lizzo then, John, because it does not come off good.
Sure, he's made some mistakes in the past, but who here among us has not? Is there no room for a little bit of forgiveness in a galaxy so vast?
I am sorry to have disappointed you, my lady. Perhaps someday I can earn such forgiveness from your grace.
Perhaps. As for now, you must live in exile on the moon of Paraquat.
It's really tough listening to her deliver dialogue. As Din, Bo-Katan, and Grogu leave, Lizzo waves to the little green guy, and he does the magic hand thing back to her. Remember Grief Karga Season 1? He says, do the magic hand thing! And then Grogu waves to him.
Now approaching landing field 3.
They're Mandalorians. You're their leader. They're going to follow you.
This is more of Bo-Katan's love language here. I mean, hearing that you're the leader. She's been down this road before, though. And when they get to the camp, she does not waste time. I mean, there's a lot of silences in the next scene in between action and dialogue, but they get there, and almost immediately she challenges Axe Woves. She's a more skilled fighter than he is, but I can't believe no one else challenged him at any point. Maybe she's just that good. And as she says when she wins and he yields, enough blood has been spilled among themselves. He brings up, Woves does, she hasn't challenged Din for the Darksaber. So if it's all about challenging, has he fought off other challengers? I mean, sure, everyone in the camp heard what happened on the bridge between her and Din and Moff Gideon. And now Axe lost. But he didn't have the Darksaber. And now he's challenging her, Bo-Katan, with words. You don't have the Darksaber, and Din has no Mandalorian blood. I mean, I guess everybody looks down on Concordians. Bo-Katan stands up for him. But still, there's that issue of the Darksaber. Fine, if Din Djarin is Mandalorian and his beliefs are okay, well then ours are too. Keep your helmet on, fine. But we say you gotta have the Darksaber, even though, I would like to point out again, he didn't have it and he was leading. Din tries giving it to her, and the others scoff. I mean, they've seen this before. It didn't work when Sabine did it in Rebels or Clone Wars, wherever she appeared. I guess it had to be Rebels. And this is when Din speaks up.
While exploring Mandalore, I was captured, and this blade was taken from me. Bo-Katan rescued me and slayed my captor. She defeated the enemy that defeated me. Would this blade then not belong to her?
Chalk this down as another thing I got problems with. How does this work? I mean, this galaxy is really trustworthy. I mean, wait a minute. Din did give proof to the armorer when he claimed he was redeemed. Now, Din spins this tale of the chain of custody of the Darksaber on Mandalore, and Axe Woves and everybody else was like, yeah, okay, I'm cool with it. I mean, before they weren't. If this was the only thing standing in the way from her being the ruler, they'd be okay with it?
It would.
I return this blade to its rightful owner.
As I've mentioned many times already, there are multiple issues making this a really poorly constructed episode, and only a couple of things could have been helped by better directing. 2 episodes remain, and there's a lot left to cover, but word from Star Wars Celebration is Episode 7 is going to amaze us all. I have seen a description of the episode, and there's confirmation that a leak I heard last year, and I believe I also reported on it, there is a confirmation that that leak is true. And if so, I am going to have a lot of trouble not hating every second of that in the next episode. I mean, if it works, I'll admit Favreau's got his finger on the pulse of the fandom, but this almost feels like him going back to his start of his work for Disney. That's the last I'll say of that. I didn't like the tone of this episode. I thought a lot of the acting, some of the dialogue, well, most of the dialogue was bad. The plot wasn't great either. The resolution of storylines felt forced, quick, and unreasonable. But that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy any of it. I just classified this as a really bad episode. Maybe my least favorite. But there were still parts of it that I smiled. And I will say this. It has tons of dialogue that, bad or not, I'll end up clipping and saving.
What do you think?
Like that. If you'd like to give your thoughts, please do. Interact with us in one of several ways. To find out how, visit our Linktree site at linktr.ee/thisisthewaypod. Email goes to thisisthewaypodcast@gmail.com. Twitter and Instagram handles are both at This Is The Way Pod. And on Facebook, it's just like Linktree/This Is The Way Pod after Facebook.com. Search for us now on YouTube as well. Please subscribe there. And thanks for joining me. You just listened to This Is The Way Podcast's reaction and discussion of Guns for Hire, Season 3, Episode 6, Chapter 22 of The Mandalorian. I'm your host, Steve Lascalzo, and this is The Way. May the Force be with you, always.